everyone, and welcome to Envision Together, going to our next level of best. Today, I am so happy to present to everyone Roni Robbins, who is my guest today, and she's written a book called Hands of Gold, and she is going to tell us about her book and about so many other things. But before we get there, she's going to tell us a lot of details about herself. So Roni's going to introduce herself in her own way. The only thing I ask is if you'll start all the way from the beginning, tell us a little bit about your childhood and upbringing, so we'll really get a sense of who it is that we're learning about and learning from today.
Well, I'm Roni Robbins,
Mhm.
and I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island. I grew up there. I went to high school there. I was interested in writing at some point. I started with just liking my penmanship, keeping a clean notebook, and I learned calligraphy. And I wrote poems. I wrote a poem that won a Mother's Day contest for my mom in Newsday, the local paper, or the Penny Saver may have been. And she won all kinds of gifts, and I did too. So I knew there was maybe something there like that I could win awards, and it seemed to be a good path for me. I didn't quite know until high school that I was going to end up being a writer. I wrote some submission for the yearbook in high school, and and they had me read it, and the class was silent, and the teacher said that's going to be our opening copy, and then I became the copy editor, which means something totally different now, but what it meant then was I wrote all the copy, or most of the copy, a lot of the copy for the yearbook. I should go back and tell you I enjoyed my English classes probably more than my science and math classes. I didn't quite understand science, but I knew I enjoyed reading and looking for the symbolism within the literature. So there were signs along the way that I might be a writer, except I really didn't know it until that maybe that moment in that class. And I got a journalism scholarship when I applied I decided to go into journalism. It seemed like a way I could write. My teacher already said I was good at it. And a friend of mine said she was doing it, and I thought it was a good career path. And I got a scholarship to the University of South Carolina for journalism. I'm like, I didn't even know I was like, you're already accepting me and giving me money. I love this. But I think some of it had to do with the demographics. Just going back, so journalism and writing is part of my life. Also, I was very involved in my Jewish community. I was a leader in the Jewish community and youth group, and that was very important to me. So that played a role years later into my novel. And I was a journalist for 36 years, and I started this book while I was raising my children, because I didn't think I could be full-time anymore, and I was freelancing. So, and then I got a book. So there you have it. I worked my way along in journalism all the way through college and and then professionally. And then I branched off just slightly because I kept writing for newspapers, and then I wrote this book. Does that enough background?
Yeah, that's a good, certainly a great starting place. That's a lot of information, and
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. So what inspired you about your grandfather's life to capture his life in a book that you called Hands of Gold? Why did you even decide to write the book?
So my grandfather left cassette tapes of his life. Remember cassette tapes? Little pop culture quiz there.
You are dating us.
Yeah, well, for sure. But he left cassette tapes of his life. My aunt had asked him to record his story for the children, for the grandchildren. We had asked enough times, and he didn't tell us all the facts. I grew up with them too, I should say. We went to where they were. They lived in Rego Park, Queens. My mom grew up in the Bronx, and my dad grew up in Brooklyn. So we are New York through and through. My husband also grew up on Long Island. So I've got a lot of New York family. But I spent time with my grandparents, and so I knew them, which helped create the characters for the book. But I used the tapes. My mom gave me the tapes, the cassette tapes, and at first I just wrote a column about leaving your legacy behind and listening to my grandfather's voice as I rode around town and how important that is to preserve the family histories. And then I left it alone. And then I decided when I raised kids, I couldn't do the journalism full time, daily newspaper grind. And I wrote the book. So I transcribed the tapes, I researched, and I filled in the blanks and I made up stuff.
Mhm. Well, what was it about his
Oh,
life that made you think this should be a book? Because,
oh,
people can leave
yeah.
cassette tapes, people can tell stories about their lives, but I mean, in fact, that happens in probably just about every family. But what about his
Right.
story that said made you say, nope, this is
Okay.
a book I'm gonna actually dedicate time and energy to?
So it started with sparks of romance, literally. My grandparents died to the day of each other a year apart.
Hmm.
And they ended up, because she was a year older and died first, they were the same age. I thought that
Wow.
was super romantic. I didn't realize that that
Hmm.
happens more often than that. But that was the first thing. I said, that is super romantic. And then, but I learned more
Wait a
things
minute. Did
about.
you say that that's very common?
Apparently, it's more common than just my grandparents, yes.
Wow.
But
Hmm.
I thought that was true love to not be able to make it to the anniversary. And the anniversary of a person's death in Judaism is very important. It's marked in a big way.
Hmm.
And so I can tell you that I'm every day I'm praying for my dad, and people say that, but I actually am going to the synagogue every day, and then I do that for a year. So the year after a person dies is very you are thinking about that person a lot more than most people if you don't believe this and do this. But I my anyway, he lost most of his family in the Holocaust. He was a big family and 11, I think 13 children, and most of them died in the Holocaust. I found out about that. This was probably a big thing, was he was a clinical trial patient for streptomycin. He had TB. He was told he was terminal at 26, but he lived till 87. Oh, I like to say 27 to 87. It's just easier, or 26 to 86. But he actually saved his own life by being a clinical trial patient for this experimental treatment for TB, which is still the biggest infectious disease in the world.
Hmm.
So I'm writing about it right now, actually. So it really, new reports came out on it, and it's increasing. And so it's in the news. So I thought that was important, that he created something that is a drug that's still used today. He tested out a product that is still used today, and he was involved in the testing of it. He was involved in a workplace shooting spree. There's a New York Daily News
Wow.
article about him talking to the gunman, but in my book, he actually saves people's lives. But it's not that far-fetched. He talked to the gunman. He had what we say chutzpah. He had gall. He had spirit.
Mm.
And he was quite the character too. He had his own sense of humor about things, and I worked that all in there.
Mhm.
So there were by hands of gold. There's about five or six things that really lined up to
Mhm.
say this man, yes, he's just
Mhm.
an everyday grandpa. Yup, just a grandpa. And in the Jewish religion, probably,
Mhm.
many grandpas lost their family in the Holocaust. I get
Mhm.
that. But I started thinking further, and I started finding out all these other details about think about it. You're 27, you have children, you have to leave your family because it's very contagious. Your wife has to be a breadwinner
Wow.
when women were not breadwinners. So there was a lot of grit There was a lot
Mm.
of perseverance, and making it through, and dealing with the, the losses and the struggles and the obstacles, and financial and health wise. What's that like?
Mm. Wow. Hmm.
Mhm.
I was reflecting on what you said about um when his wife had to be the breadwinner when women being the breadwinner wasn't so popular. Um, I don't know, it just caused me to reflect on a lot of the things she may have faced, and the whole family had to face. There were a lot of men that in that generation that thought you're taking a job away from a man, but did they consider what was going on in her personal world that would cause her to have to be out there? I know today we would just say, well, if a woman wants to work, let her work. But in that situation, it was so needful for her to work and then face all of the, you know, potential
Yeah.
conflict around that. Hmm.
And
So,
we've come a long way, women.
hmm
It wasn't that long ago. I mean, my mom didn't work. That whole generation didn't work. So think about 2 generations ago. Well, I
right.
guess it depends on what generation you're in.
hmm
This was 1930s, 40s, 50s. Women did
hmm
not work.
hmm
Women did not work. Now, she worked in the garment district, so maybe that was a more traditional female job.
hmm
They were on welfare for a while.
hmm
Um, my kids will never know. I hope they will never know that. But I mean, I think we're all, we were blessed because they went through all that for us. I think their story is not unique to them. I think that generation went through the Great Depression and the world wars, and we have it sort of good,
hmm
uh, you know,
Yeah.
in
So
comparison.
your book, The Hands of Gold, in a previous conversation, you told me it has multiple meanings or double meaning. Unpack that a little bit.
So the original title was going to be Meet Me in Heaven, by the way, because my grandmother said to my grandfather, tie up loose ends and meet me in heaven. And his response in his character was, you do what you're told if you know what's good for you after 65 years of marriage. So you can imagine that. He was funny. I'm funny. I try to be funny. So it's all in there. Hands of gold. So if you think about it, hands are our livelihood, hands are nurturing.
Mhm,
You use them comfort somebody. You might, in our religion, we use it to bless the children, to hold your hands over their head and bless them. Holding hands, very romantic.
mhm,
Hands, at the deathbed, holding hands at the death, trying to comfort. Okay, that's hands, right?
mhm, mhm,
And then you've got gold. Gold is golden years. And we in the Jewish culture, we refer to America as the Golden Medina, the Golden Land. The
mhm,
streets were to be paved with gold. Many immigrants thought that our streets were paved with gold.
mhm,
I said the golden years. Gold is wealth. Gold is wealth. Gold is it's jewelry, so it's wealth. It's showy. So there's a sign, there's different signs to, there's being without it and being with it, so
mhm,
there's lots there.
mhm.
I don't know if you can see, but I'm wearing a hand of gold, that
Oh,
subconscious. It's a Hamsa. It's a good luck charm.
mm,
But it looks like a hand of gold.
I see.
Um, my grandmother gave me one, and I lost it, and I got it back. That works into the novel.
Mm,
So just a little, that may be, a little bit of, I might be spoiler alert, but maybe, but I subconsciously it worked in. I didn't even think about it until afterwards. But I have these, they're good luck charms. I have them all over the place. In my house, and some other people do. I saw 2 people wearing one today.
mm,
Maybe it's Jewish, but maybe it's not.
mm,
Because I've had people ask me about it. Probably has a Jewish side of it, but it's called the
okay.
Hamsa. and it's spiritual, and it is a hand of gold.
Hmm.
No, I'm sorry, it's a hand of God. So some people mess up and say hand of God, and I said that's okay. It can be hand of God. I like
Mhm.
hand of God.
Mhm. You know what's so funny is I almost did that. I almost said hand of God.
It's very easy to say that, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, that would have been a good title too, except, I can't. I feel like that's a little bit sacrilegious almost for me to think
Hmm.
I could write about a hand of God. It's not that religious of a book. It's more culture.
Okay.
Mhm.
How did you told me a little bit about you navigating from being a journalist to writing nonfiction and then to fiction. Um, but during the previous conversation, you said never let people steal your dream. What does that mean to you, and does it have anything to do with your transition?
Well, along the way, people in my life have said, shouldn't you do something else? I mean, journalism doesn't make that much money. At some point, people around me, I won't name names, but somebody very close to me said, maybe you want to be a real estate agent. This writing thing isn't really doing too well for you. It's frustrating sometimes to get work as a writer.
Mhm.
At certain points, it was like around 2008 when everything went online, and then it was and then I was working full time during COVID, but I imagine that was hard because people were cutting back and everything went online. I had to change and know how to write online, which is different from writing for a print newspaper or magazine. So I was told along the way, you're not that good at feature writing, you're not that good at, you know, business writing. And hey, I've been doing both of those for many,
Mhm.
many years successfully. So,
Mhm.
just one person's opinion. I
Mhm.
mean, it took me 10 years to get this book published. It took me about 7 years to write it. I was afraid. Rejection is definitely a fear that holds people back. And uh, but you can't. I thought I had 200 rejections because I had two big folders. I mailed my manuscript out and got letters back before everything's online now. So one day I said, I'm going to count these rejections so I can use this in my book talks. And it was only 50, but I kept every little letter that said, we're not interested. Really, nobody wants to hear about another immigrant story. You tell that to the very successful writers out there, blockbusters, and bestsellers. You tell it to those
Mhm.
authors that no
Mhm.
one wants to hear another immigrant story, because they're doing very well right now. They've been doing very well, but maybe at a certain point, tell it to the 100 authors of my publisher, that got the same reaction. Nobody wants to hear another immigrant story. But all you need is one yes, maybe a few yeses. My people liked the book. I didn't need to fear so much, but it was an unknown. And there were naysayers who said you should do something else. This book, this book of yours, I mean, when is it ever going to get published? Maybe you should just self-publish. There were so many people telling me what to do or what the right way to go is. They've told me about a year ago, when I lost my job, I should be this kind of writer or I should be that kind of writer. I stuck with my guns, and I'm writing for two publications now, journalism, regular standard traditional journalism, which is now not even that. It's online publications mostly. But I kept sticking with my guns. I stuck with my guns about the book and finally got it published professionally. And I lost my first publisher over a legal battle. 6 months later, I got the publisher who took me to the finish line, has been working with me and much more communicative than the first one. So you know what? Just don't let people tell you what to do. Don't let people
Mhm.
steal your dream. I didn't make up that line. and my husband used to be in Amway, and
Mhm.
they had a t-shirt that we bought that said, "Don't let anyone steal your dream."
Mm,
So yeah.
nice. Okay. So, your grandfather left these cassettes, but even if you never turned them into a book, um, what did his message and his stories mean to you just as a descendant of his?
Well, first of all, in the tapes, he said, if somebody in the family wants to write this, so be it. And I took that as a personal message from above, as I was the only professional writer. You know, I'm a journalist. Nobody else in the family was that. That doesn't mean they can't write. And I've discovered many authors in the family that started out doing something else and now they're, also authors. But when I started, I saw that as a finger pointing at me. This was
Mm,
my mission. So there was that. I learned so much about the genealogy. I guess we knew that there was Holocaust in the family, but not how many people and where they died and what their lives were like before. And I was able to delve into that and learn about that. I knew my grandmother was, my grandmother was a tough lady, but for the most part, when I knew them, my grandmother was sick a lot. It seemed,
mm,
and she lumbered with she had some circulation problems in her legs, and she had trouble walking, and she would complain.
mm,
So I saw her as the one who was always the health problem, not him.
mm,
So I learned a lot about that. I wouldn't have known that she would have, what she had to go through.
right.
I knew some of it. I never saw her as I saw her as my grandma. I didn't think of her as
Mm,
like a woman who would have experienced things that women experience as a young person. And that I knew sort of some of this. She was a great singer. I heard that.
mm.
I didn't realize that she had she sang in the Yiddish theater, or I didn't even
Wow.
appreciate any of these stories. I really
Mm.
didn't. It was just like, I want to go play. I don't really care. You're old, whatever.
Mhm.
And I think that we don't appreciate our grandparents now. They were the leaders of the family. I was there, I witnessed it, but I didn't appreciate that what I knew that my grandmother was a good cook.
Mhm.
The family meals, the bringing the family together. I always enjoyed that.
Mhm.
Um, I just didn't know all the details. So it
So,
was enlightening.
what would you say your greatest legacy is from your grandfather? And you can touch on your grandmother as well. What's the greatest legacy that they left you?
Obviously the Jewish culture, the faith, the strength of family life and how that works in with the religion.
Mm.
They certainly set us up for that. My grandfather taught my mom to play violin, and so
Mm.
my mom taught us to play violin. I think there's something to be said by passing on your talents,
Mhm.
um, and your strength and so my dad passed on his artistry because he actually worked with his hands and was a craftsman, and he was a metal worker. So you inherit a lot from your family. I think in terms of my grandparents, I would say the ability to persist, to not let everything get in your way, to not let obstacles get in your
Mm.
path, because
So
they
that's
went
where
through
you got that tenacity around your writing
prob
and your dreams.
I wouldn't have known it because I wouldn't have known it, but yes, I think
Mhm.
that you don't let obstacles get in your way. And whether that, thank God I haven't had health problems. But people do, and they persevere. They have financial struggles. I have never known these, but what I did, and like you said, what I did inherit is to keep pushing, to not let to keep your dream in mind. And for them, it was as simple as just to be able to live and raise a family in America. That was enough to be able to practice their religion, because they came from a place that didn't value their religion. And here they could practice their religion out in the open for the most part, and have that freedom. That's all they wanted. They didn't need a career. They didn't need a huge amount of money. They just needed to raise their family in peace, with strong values of religion, faith, and faith in God and
Would you
family.
say that their strong love is a part of your legacy, or it affects your family in a certain way, or?
Well, my husband and I have been married 30 years. That's
Oh.
not always so, just recently. That's not always so easy. My parents were married before my dad passed well, 8 months ago. They were married almost 60 years. His parents were married more than 50 years. So we come from that, you go through life together. My husband says, murder, yes, divorce, no. So I'm not sure that's the way to go, but seeing it through, being
Mhm.
together, being
Mhm.
hand in hand
That
through life's
commitment.
journey. Yeah.
Hmm.
So love. I'm super romantic in that was the first spark. There are actually sparks in my novel. When they met, she was wearing a sweater, and you know what happens when you touch somebody and there's that electricity. Well, that's literally, maybe it's, goofy or whatever, but there
Hmm.
were literally sparks between them. And
Hmm.
I played up on the details of their romance, which some of the family might not like, that there was sex in the novel. Ooh. But
I was
I
gonna touch
love.
on that as you bring up family. I was gonna ask you, what was your family's reaction to your book, especially those whose lives are maybe depicted in the novel?
Sure. Most 99% of the people are supportive. And but and my mom is super supportive, I should say, which is the most important thing to me,
Hmm.
because this was her father. And I changed all the names, I changed and made up stuff. So I did ask some of the family that I was concerned would be upset or wonder, why did I play with the facts so much that it looked like there was some dirty laundry? And I asked, and they said, it's fiction, right? And I said, absolutely. So, uh, but there was one person that I was fearful would sue me. She hasn't. That doesn't mean she won't, but it was so much of a fear that I had such. I got an LLC to protect myself, and I had cold feet before the first publisher was willing to put me out there. I got cold feet because of it. But
Hmm.
I think that there is some concern that I did make my grandmother seem a little sexy, uh, and uh, and and maybe commercialize the story for, I don't know why. It's not like it's on television or anything, so it's
Hmm.
not real. It's just that, yes, I use their story for my own purposes, but because I wanted to do this as a challenge to myself, and have a book out there.
Hmm.
So yes, but the book is entertaining and people enjoy it, and
Hmm.
it educates and it exposes them to a different time and place, and so there's that too. So it's both.
Okay. So one of the things that your book shares is your grandfather. When he became ill, he was told that he wouldn't see 26, but he actually lived to 86 years old.
Right.
Um, so how, um, I don't know, how does that affect people, or how they receive the story? Is it encouraging? Does it help your family member who's maybe against the story, maybe think twice and say, well, maybe it helps people?
I don't think that that is, it's your, it's your parents. So I understand the sensitivities. Um, so I understand the sensitivities, but I go back to where my grandfather said, if somebody wants to write this story, so be it. He didn't figure how I would write it. So the question is, would he be proud of me for that? I'm not sure. He might question what I did with
Mhm.
certain information and why I did that instead of sticking to the facts. This is the old story, with anything I write. People want it a certain way. They would like it written the way they would like it written. Well, this is the way I would write it. If somebody else
Mhm.
wants to write it in a different way, so
Mhm.
be it.
Mhm.
But they had the same access to the information that I did. I spent, years making it to something where people would learn and would appreciate their lives more and know what they can do with their lives, that they don't have. People are
Define the
told,
odds, and even
yes,
even the doctor's diagnosis, or
correct.
saying that you won't make it beyond 26. Are you finding that readers are encouraged and inspired and saying, yeah, I just need to, have
Yeah,
more.
if
Go ahead.
if they can do it, why can't I do it? They went through so much, and yet they pushed on, because what is the alternative? So yes, people are having health challenges, and it's an attitude. So my grandfather says in the book a line: some days the cupcake or the cake falls with the chocolate side down. And sometimes, 2-second rule, it doesn't. But that's just the way it is.
Mhm.
It's just, it's a gamble. Everyone, this is the hand that you were dealt.
Mhm.
Deal with it.
Mhm. What do
You
you want people to get out of it the most? Like you invested a lot of time,
yes.
and wouldn't give up. You devoted yourself to making sure this gets out there. Um, where does that stem from? What are you trying to send into the world? Why was it so important?
Because I had a story to tell, and I think everyone has a story to tell.
Mhm.
I wanted to preserve their story. I'm working on my dad's story. Yes, people knew him, but I feel like it's a gift to them. That we live a life, people commemorate that life at the end, but this is preserving his life for, preserving their
Mhm.
lives for a lot longer.
Mhm.
Whether it's true or not, much
But
of it
there
is
wasn't a
true.
certain something that you want readers to take from it?
Readers to be transported to a different time and place and realize that what it was like back then, that we don't know. I want them to recognize the importance of their lives and what you could do with your life, and really the importance of faith and family values and the simple part of
Okay.
life.
Mhm.
Those are some of the lessons that I hope that they take from the book. I hope that they laugh and cry and walk away, thinking about how it's related to their own lives and their own
Mhm.
families, and
Mhm.
and going out and interviewing their own family to
Mhm.
preserve that. It doesn't have to be a book. It could just be
Mm.
something, because pictures fade, and pictures, if nobody explains to you who's in the pictures, you have no idea. You're just going to trash the album. These people don't mean anything to you, but a story goes on.
So part of it is just part of what you're conveying is the importance of legacy.
Correct. Very important.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, let's just imagine that after we've had this conversation, the audience gets everything we talked about. What is the one thing you really want them to hold on to?
Family.
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 Family
Yeah. I mean,
matters.
it's all goes back to family, I
Okay.
think. religion and family. And you know what? I there's so much hatred in the world too, I should say, to learn what was going on then, and that life is cyclical. Like he had TB. TB is still in the news. Just TB's in the news, more right now. We had COVID. They had TB. We are still dealing with women not being on the same plane as men, not being paid the same as men, and just hatred among people who are different, and wars. There was wars then, there's wars now. So nothing really has changed. We think things have changed. Yes, we have more money. We have most people are more well off than they were back then. Maybe that's true. We're comfortable in our lives. We have a lot of technology that makes our lives easier.
Right.
So, but appreciate the simple things that go back to family, and because I think that's really what it's all about.
Beautiful. I always have guests share whatever they want to share about how the audience can get in touch with you, get your book, have you as a guest speaker, anything along those lines that you'd like to share, go ahead.
Yes, I do book talks all over the country now. I was just in Los Angeles, and I went to New York for a publishers meeting, for the authors, to get together with the authors. So I've been to New York too, South Carolina, North Carolina. So I would love to be able to talk to your groups online. I do book talks, Zoom and what have you, online also for book clubs and women's clubs. How get in touch with me? My book is all over the internet in terms of Amazon, books, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. You can get it wherever books are sold. My website is ronirobbins.com. You got to spell my name right. RONIROBBINS.com. You can learn more than you'd ever want to know about me, my book, the background to the book, where I'm speaking next, different media that's been written about me. The book is in the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. It's in some libraries. But if you Google me, you will find me, because I write constantly for the 2 different publications. And reach out to me. My email is as easy as my website. It's roni.robbins@yahoo.com. I love to hear from readers. But they can also write reviews on Amazon if they read the book. I love all of that. So please, yes, reviews help me to get the Hands of Gold in more golden hands. Tell other people if you read it and like it.
That's wonderful. Okay. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you being a guest on my show.
I appreciate it.
A great conversation.
Thank you.